Part C. In this part of the test, you'll hear 2 different extracts. In each extract, you'll hear health professionals talking about aspects of their work. For questions 31 to 42, choose the answer A, B, or C, which fits best according to what you hear. Complete your answers as you listen. Now look at extract.
You hear a GP, called Dr. Georgia Sims, giving a presentation on the subject of social prescribing. You now have 90 seconds to read questions 1 to 6.
Hello, my name's Georgia Sims, and I'm a GP working at a practice in a small country town. My special interest is community mental health, and my presentation today is on the subject of what's called social prescribing. I've been involved in a community health project which has been using this, and which seems to be making a difference to the well-being of some of my patients. The project was inspired by the recent initiative that encourages GPs to include social prescribing in a patient's therapy. GPs are now able to write a prescription that allows a patient to attend one of a number of activities, each of which focuses on sociability and the feeling of belonging to a community. The activities encourage patients to link in with non-medical sources of support in both indoor and outdoor contexts. When I first heard about social prescribing, I had some concerns, but I was still keen to explore how it might be of help to my patients who suffer from moderate levels of depression and anxiety. I identified 3 long-term patients who often spoke of loneliness and feelings of isolation, in addition to their mental health issues. But I was a little worried that the effect might be to reduce the input of GPs in patient care and cut back on the amount of direct contact GPs have with them. But after reading about various social prescribing projects that had been underway for a while, I realised this wasn't the case. Indeed, I began to see that my having the ability to prescribe a social activity would be helpful to my patients. Although there are several activities that lend themselves to social prescribing, like walking or singing in a community choir, I decided to go with a gardening project for several reasons. I'd already been contacted by the manager of a well-established community garden, which is tended by volunteers. Unfortunately, some volunteers had recently moved out of the area and more needed to be recruited. The garden is located close to public transport, which was an important consideration as none of my patients are able to drive for medical reasons. My hope was, of course, that the activity would improve their physical health. I'd previously encouraged them to try Keep Fit sessions, but this hadn't been a success. But I also hoped that being out in the fresh air in a non-threatening environment would have a positive emotional effect on them too. I was cautiously optimistic about the benefits to my patients of becoming involved in the gardening project. However, I was concerned that the hard work involved in digging a garden might be a daunting prospect for some of them, particularly those who had physical limitations related to health conditions. For example, one patient had undergone knee surgery the previous year and was understandably cautious about digging. Another patient has chronic back pain and was therefore unable to bend or stoop down. It was important to make sure the project manager was aware of their limitations and could tailor the activities to suit the patient's abilities and reassure them that the activities were indeed within their capabilities. After the first month of the project, I spoke to each of the 3 participants individually and was pleased by their feedback. All reported that they were enjoying an enhanced sense of well-being. They all admitted that when I first talked to them about the gardening project, they'd not expected to enjoy being out in the fresh air as much as they eventually did. This was the most welcome news for me. All other attempts I'd made to get them involved in such activities had been unsuccessful. One patient added that he left the gardening project each week feeling that it was a job well done. And I was very happy to hear that all 3 felt they had more self-confidence and felt that the future was brighter for them as a result of taking part. It all boded well for initiatives we might go on to set up. Looking back, I realised that I'd been unnecessarily sceptical about prescribing activities that were already available in the community. After all, I'd reasoned, people have been able to join all sorts of community projects on their own for a long time. Why would a GP's prescription make a difference? Something that one patient said, however, brought home to me the value of social prescribing. When I asked him how he felt about being involved in the gardening project, he said, "Without your gentle push, I'd never have considered it." When I asked him to explain, he said that it was like any other prescription I gave him for his condition. He trusted my expertise and viewed my social prescription as another part of his treatment. This, above all, has convinced me that social prescribing is a valuable addition to a range of mental health therapies.
Now look at Extract 2.
You hear an interview with a physician called Dr. Tidita Hussein, who's talking about treating patients with cystic fibrosis.
You now have 90 seconds to read questions 37 to 42.
Cystic fibrosis is a condition that causes mucus to be thicker and stickier than it should be. Dr. Tidita Hussein specializes in cystic fibrosis treatment and is here to share her thoughts on caring for people with the condition. Tidita, can you tell us a bit more about patients who suffer from cystic fibrosis?
Absolutely. Sufferers tend to carry 2 to 5 times as much salt in their bodies as those without the condition, so you can see why their mucus is thicker than average. Treatment for these patients is usually quite time-consuming and repetitive. Patients are often required to stay in hospital for long stretches, and as the symptoms of the condition begin to present very early on in the patient's life, many of my patients are young people, and so we tend to see lots of patients with cystic fibrosis finding these hospital visits frustrating.
Right.
In fact, throughout the UK, about 80% of patients with cystic fibrosis who are hospitalised report feeling at least minimal levels of depression.
How about young patients who aren't currently hospitalized? What can be challenging about their treatment?
Well, patients can be required to take around 30 pills a day to keep cystic fibrosis under control. So it's understandable that teenagers and young people who just want to be free and independent might resent this ordeal if they think they can get away with it. One of the most difficult things we have to contend with is the fact that if patients stop taking their medication or doing their daily breathing treatments, their condition won't immediately worsen. Instead, it will gradually become more severe until they contract a serious infection, which puts their lives at risk.
So, what approaches do you use when treating patients with cystic fibrosis?
Well, we've found distraction therapy to be extremely useful. We're incredibly lucky to have received a donation of a number of virtual reality headsets following their success in a number of treatment trials. We use the virtual reality headsets to transport the patient to outdoor settings, often corresponding to the activities they're required to do with us. When they complete breathing exercises on a stationary bike, for example, the VR headsets display a virtual outdoor bike ride. Our patients find it helpful to pretend to be somewhere else during treatment, and it's often easier for us to administer breathing treatments to patients using these headsets, as they're more relaxed when they're not focused on the actuality of the test.
So, what sorts of changes have you seen in your patients as a result of these methods?
One of my patients, a 24-year-old man with cystic fibrosis who was in hospital waiting for a lung transplant, well, he found treatment very difficult at first. He was preoccupied by his need for a transplant and frustrated by feelings of powerlessness. He would often resist treatment. We started using the virtual reality systems with him as soon as we got them, and it took a while for him to get on board, but when he did, it was like someone had breathed new life into him. Not only did he stop hindering his treatment, he actually began to look forward to it. He's even started helping us to think about other ways we can improve the experiences of our patients, like improving social interaction.
Yes, I understand that there are difficulties involved in patient communication.
We're looking into the possibility of instant messaging functions between patients, and even virtual games that they can play against each other. Unfortunately, patients with cystic fibrosis have to be kept apart to avoid cross-infection. It's just one more cross to bear for our patients, that they can't talk to those going through the same thing.
Right.
Our patients get plenty of interaction with myself and the rest of the staff, but we'd like to make sure they have access to a network of fellow sufferers too, for support and advice.
I see. That all sounds quite futuristic. Are there any other advances on the horizon for the treatment of cystic fibrosis?
Well, there's a new drug that's been in the news recently. It's a combination of lumacaftor and ivacaftor. You might know it by the brand name Orkambi. The drug works by improving the level of water and salt in the body, thereby reducing the thick mucus that causes illness and respiratory issues in those with cystic fibrosis. Even more exciting and futuristic, though, is the possibility of gene therapy, where the genetic mutation that causes cystic fibrosis in individuals is replaced with a healthy gene. This would effectively cure those with the condition and significantly extend the lives of thousands of people and remove the need for lengthy stays in hospital.